Welcome to Learn Laws, where knowledge is power, not legal advice, just for education. Need real counsel, don't roll the dice. Always speak with the license discerning.
Welcome to Learn Laws. I'm James White, and we have Andrew Easler in the house. This is our, I believe, episode number 5.
Number five.
So I guess we'll jump right in. Question, I guess, for you is I want to know the power of yes and no. So we were talking about this earlier today in preparation for our podcast, and I said, hey, this happens all the time. People say, they'll be in a conversation with somebody, whether they're out for drinks or they're on the phone or they're trying to sell or build relationships or whatnot. And somebody asks them a question and ask, like, can you send me a list, or can you help me mow my grass, or can you help me move, or something like that, right? And the instant response I think most people have, especially when it comes to friends, family, or really trying to build a business, is yes. The answer is always yes, because I think our culture is ingrained to say yes because we're a customer service oriented culture. And the power of yes means it could be a big deal from a legal context, right? When it comes to laws and regulations and so forth. So, and I was telling you earlier today, I had a situation where I said yes. And then after I got off the phone with that individual, I thought about it and I said, oh, the actual answer is no. And I was asking you how to deal with that situation.
Right.
And I gave you some background. And this is where we came up with the topic for the podcast today. The power of yes and no. So I'll let you interject here and let me know. So I'm going to say yes, and you're going to tell me the consequences, I guess, or kind of what that means from a legal context.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's doing business, which is probably most people, right? Even if you're an employee, you're going to end up creating contracts and agreements that you're going to be bound to follow whenever you're assenting to things. So first, we have to start with a foundation, right? What does it mean when you say yes? Well, legally, if we're going to do an analysis of whether or not your agreement or your assent has some kind of strings attached to it, we have to find out whether there was an offer, whether that offer was accepted or rejected, and if it was accepted, is there consideration that came along with it? Okay, so offer, acceptance, and consideration. So this is just the foundational principles in the Commonwealth and common law for how to form a contract that can be binding.
So offer, acceptance, and consideration.
Right.
Okay. So let's start with the offer then, I guess. The offer would be, hey, James, can you send me a list?
Sure. Okay. So if that's the offer, can you send me a list? And
Yes.
What are the terms of that offer, right? We have to make sure that when you have an offer, that you have terms that are clearly communicated,
Yep.
that it includes the essential terms, right? So what are you doing in exchange? What are the terms? When is it going to be delivered, right? Is there any consideration that you're going to pay in exchange for that list, right? So if it doesn't have the essential terms, then it may not be enough to constitute a meeting of the minds, which is a legal term of art that basically says, hey, do we both have the same understanding as to what's supposed to happen if you assent, if you say yes? Okay, so that's offer. Assuming that offer had all of the terms that we needed to have in order to make it an enforceable contract.
Yeah.
Next, we move into acceptance.
Okay.
So when we're talking about acceptance, what you communicate back to the other side really kind of depends and determines whether or not it constitutes acceptance legally. Okay. So if we're looking under common law, which means usually for services, right? If we're talking about products, then in the United States, we often fall under UCC guidelines, which is for products. Okay. But if we're talking about services, so can you give me can you perform this part of the contract? Okay.
Yeah.
If you're talking about services and you say yes, but I would want $500 in exchange for providing you that list.
Yeah.
Then that's not technically an acceptance. Under the common law, when you say yes, but, and you introduce new terms to the deal, then now it's actually a rejection of that original offer and a counter offer that gives the other side the opportunity to then accept or reject and provide another counter offer in return.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So in my situation, when somebody said, hey, can you provide a list? And I said yes, and then I hung up the phone, that's an offer and acceptance, but there's no consideration.
Yeah, now you're talking about the analysis.
Okay.
So we have three things that we need. So let's say that the original offer was enough to constitute all of the essential terms. Your communication of yes is your verbal assent to agree to that particular
Request.
or offer.
Okay.
Now we need to know whether or not that acceptance is enforceable. Well, in order to find out whether it's enforceable, we need to find out whether consideration has occurred.
Okay.
Consideration we often think of as, hey, here's $500. That's the consideration in exchange for you getting that list, right?
Okay.
But it can also be relying to their detriment. Let's say that person needed that list in order to move forward with binding themselves to a new contract that list would then be a part of, right? They needed that list in order to perform on their end of the contract.
Yeah.
And they come to you and say, hey, can you give me that list? You say yes. They say, okay, cool. Now I can move forward with this other contract. They've now changed their position with regard to another obligation that they have, in which case that alone can constitute consideration.
Oh, wow.
So
on their behalf or
on
my
their
behalf?
behalf.
Okay, so
Right.
that would be consideration they paid me?
Well, it's consideration that makes the contract potentially enforceable.
Ah, okay.
Because now they have basically relied to their detriment
Yep.
on you being able to provide that information for them in order for them to perform another obligation in the future. So they've changed their position.
Okay.
So that could constitute consideration.
Now, the reality of it, though, is what are the chances of that would actually constitute consideration for a list, for instance, in my case? Now, my case, obviously, it's pretty simple, right? There's not really any reliance on that list or anything like that because the list is made up of a bunch of names and numbers. But in my situation, obviously, I would say if I had objections or say I said yes because I was being friendly, I didn't really think through the question properly, which I think happens a lot.
Right.
Where we're just having a bantering back and forth a conversation and somebody says, hey, can you help me move? And I think everybody's been in this situation. This is why I wanted to bring this up because I catch myself doing this sometimes. And most of the time I'll just say yes and then do it. It's not a big deal for me. But this time after I got off the phone and I said, you know, has that person ever did anything for me? Like, why am I giving them this list? Like, I did all the work to build the list.
Right.
I spent my own money on advertising to build this list. And now this person asked me for the list, which, you know, I like the person. They're, you know, they've been, you know, reasonable to me over the years.
Neutral.
Yeah, reasonable, neutral. They're a business associate, so it's not like, you know, I go to family events with them or anything. And then I thought to myself, why am I doing this for free? And I think this is the biggest problem a lot of entrepreneurs have, the power of no, right? We'll get into that in a little bit, I think. But again, after I got off the phone, I turned to you and said, you know, this doesn't feel right to me. Like, why am I doing all the work? And they're saying, hey, I need a list to provide it to somebody else. And I'm like, I don't even really, you know, that other person, I have not, you know, I'm friendly with that other person as well. But again, you know, my experience is they've never really done anything to help me out. So why would I want to give them that list, right? So that's when I said to you, I said, what would I do in this situation? And my answer was just, you know, let them know, hey, I don't feel comfortable with, you know, sharing this information. I've worked hard for it. So, you know, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share it with you. You know, have fun, good luck, blah, 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 blah. And then that's when we said, hey, this would be a good podcast to show because I've had this situation multiple times in my life, right? So, you know, I remember when I was younger and I was building my first business, which was a landscaping lawn care company. And I had this contract with a major carrier in a worldwide carrier. And the manager of the distribution hub I became very good friends with, you know, hired me when I was young. So I had this allegiance or loyalty to this person because they gave me a contract, they gave me an opportunity. And you know, it was a back and forth relationship, right?
Right.
And I remember he was going on vacation or something like that. And he said, hey, James, you know, I have this flyer distribution route as a part-time business and I'm going away and I need you to, you know, cover my territory. Would you mind covering my territory for, you know, I don't know, it was like 30 or 60 days or something. And, you know, I'll pay you 25 cents per house to deliver the flyers. Now, back then that was like, you know, 2002, 2003. So it was still low back then.
Right.
And I remember talking to my mother, I don't know what I was, like 18 or 19 or something, right? And I depended on my mother a lot for her, you know, experience because I would ask her questions and I'm young and I don't have a lot of life experience yet. And she said, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense, right? They're taking advantage of you. And I think there was a fine line in my life. This has kind of been, a lead up to this conversation really, but there's a fine line, I think, between being grateful for somebody helping you and giving you business because you're performing an obligation, you're doing it well, which is why they continue to hire you, and saying yes and no, right?
Right.
And I ended up, I think it was I called him and I said, hey, look, I can't do this. I got a business to run. I don't mind helping you out. But again, this is just, I'm too busy. I don't have time. And then it sort of soured the relationship. So I think that's followed me my whole life, that one lesson where now I want to say yes and I get worried about saying no. So I don't want to say no. I just want to say yes because I'm worried that if I say no, and I think a lot of people are in my situation, that's going to negatively affect their relationship for the future, whether it's potential business, whether it's potential loss of business and so forth. So I think that's where in my mind, I always want to say yes, right? But then then you've taught me over, the last 15 years of knowing you and doing business together in various different ventures, the power of no, and why no should be your first response to almost everything until you have time to think about it, right? Or you should say maybe, I'll think about it and let you know. And that should be the default answer, but it's really hard to retrain my brain.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction that you're making. And I think, of course, everyone's on their own little journey as we go through. And we've all learned our own lessons over time. And sometimes we have to forget lessons that we've taught ourselves and learn new ones in order to find new opportunities. And that's actually one of the things that when I first taught on day one, I was asked to teach a class, Introduction to Analytical Skills at FAMU College of Law. And day one of that class, I got up in front of the class and I said, everyone who wants to say yes, raise your hand. Anybody who wants to say no, put your hand down. And they asked me, yes to what? What are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to? Mm-hmm. And I just repeated the prompt and waited for people to raise their hands or make a decision as to keep their hands down.
Yeah.
And as you would expect, about 50% of the class had raised their hands and 50% of the class had kept them lowered.
So they raised their hands and said yes without knowing what they were saying yes
without
to?
any idea what they were saying yes to.
That's very interesting.
Right? And so this was kind of an experiment to kind of get a feel for where their mind is at, right? What is their psychology? What's going on? What's their fear? What is their willingness to move forward with risk? And what's their risk tolerance? What is their personality type?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so once I had got everybody to lock in their answers, it helped me give them a little bit of advice when it came to approaching law school going forward. And so when I was speaking to the people that said yes, those are the kind of people who are willing to go out and take risks. And those are the people who want to go out and do everything, right? Or like you, right?
Yes.
You want to say yes because you don't want to miss out on a particular opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, those people, they're more susceptible to having situations where they've taken on too much, right? And they're not able to handle and juggle all of the different tasks that are going to be involved with managing law school, right? It's a lot of work to do.
Yes.
And so for those people, I encourage them to learn how to say no, right? Start thinking about what are things that you're going to prioritize and make important in your life. When somebody asks you to go drinking at night, when somebody asks you to join a club, when somebody asks you to do all of these other things that are outside of the extracurriculars, start prioritizing and valuing the things that you want to say yes to and making sure to practice saying no to people.
Yes, and that makes, I said yes multiple times here, right? I'm a yes,
right.
I like saying yes because, again, I like to make deals. And I think a lot of people, when they have this situation or this problem that I have, that I've had my whole life, is they're always trying, not necessarily trying to please people, but they don't want to lose opportunities, right?
Right,
Especially
just like that
entrepreneurs.
paper route,
Yes.
or flyer route that you were talking about, right?
Correct.
If you had said yes, maybe that relationship would have blossomed into something with a much greater opportunity or value for you.
Yes.
So we're all making value judgments in every decision that we're making and trying to understand in both short term and long term what kind of benefits we're going to receive. Right? If I say yes to this particular situation, what's the long-term consequence? If I say no, what's the long-term consequence? is there a benefit to improving this relationship, even though the short-term value is less than what I can perceive as a potential long-term return? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. From a business perspective, obviously this is business oriented show. So,
Right.
if you're dealing with a family member, that may be much different than what we're talking about here. But I agree with you. Yeah. I think I analyze that all the time from a business perspective. When I say yes, I say, okay, what are the long-term? And I always feel like there's always a reason why somebody has come into my life, or there's always a reason why something is happening. Right.
Right.
So when somebody asks me for a favor or something like that, and I say yes, and then I think about it and I really mean no, I'm going back and forth saying, is this worth it? Is this not worth it? What are the potential consequences of me saying yes or doing certain things, right?
Right.
And I think that's where my stress comes in, is because I say yes, then I realize I wanted to say no, and now I don't know how to handle the situation of calling that person or texting them or doing whatever, saying, hey, just FYI, after I said yes, I thought about it and I just don't feel comfortable. That's a very hard conversation to have, because then it makes me look like I'm willy-nilly, even though I'm not. I just didn't have time to think about the question. Especially people with ADHD like me, we don't really think through a lot of which makes it's a good thing and a bad thing. It makes us successful in a lot of ways,
Right.
but it's also very detrimental to our long-term success, right? So my answer obviously is going to be, hey, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Thank you very much. Have a great day, but we'll work together on something else maybe.
Well, remember, if we're always making value judgments when we make those kinds of decisions, other people are making those value judgments themselves. And so in that situation, maybe instead of just going back and saying, hey, I thought about it and I decided against it, have the other person make their own value judgment as to the worth of that decision that you've done, right? If you've committed to doing something for somebody else, my suggestion would be to ask them, what do you think that particular decision is worth? And if they come back and say, I don't think it's worth anything to me, then you know that person has no value for or respect for what you've decided to offer, and you have a disparity between the value and the appraisal of your own worth and that service that you're going to be providing them and what their perception is. And so either you need to reset that relationship and actually explain your worth, or cut it off, right? I think this person you've known for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I've known them for a long time.
So, I think that's long enough for somebody to really understand your worth
value.
and the value of what you provide.
Yeah.
And being on a neutral setting with him where he hasn't really done anything terrible to you, but he hasn't done anything really great for you.
Yeah.
I think you probably know the answer to that.
Yeah, I definitely probably know the answer, right? Maybe that's what I'm afraid of saying no for, because I know the answer, what the answer will be, and then I will realize that person never valued my experience or my work ethic to capture that list, for instance, right?
Right.
And then that's going to disappoint me. And as an entrepreneur, once I'm disappointed with somebody, I really don't want to work with them anymore. So by saying no, I feel like it's going to destroy that 15 years or that 10 years of building that relationship for whatever reason, right? Because again, when I build relationships, I don't build relationships for the fact of just trying to sell somebody or make money from somebody or have them trying to release money on a project or something. I build relationships because I genuinely like that person, or I find that person very interesting, right?
Right.
And so that's one of my biggest challenges is when you build relationships and you have long-term, you have long-term friendly relations where you say hi and bye and go for coffees and lunches and dinners for the sake, because you like that working with that person, you like them, and then something like this happens, and then you say, well, what is it worth? And they say, well, it's worth nothing. Or they say, hey, I'm your friend, and they pull the friend card out, even though you're not really friends. It's more of a business associate type relationship. When the answer is no, then that's very disappointing to an entrepreneur. And I think that's my problem. I get very disappointed when I actually try and value myself and the people that I thought I liked and respected. When they don't value me, then it's very disappointing for myself. But I think this is the same case for many other people, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's a personal situation, whether it's helping a friend move. I mean, how many people have said, hey, I help that person move all the time, or I help that person do things when I need them. They're never there for me. And I think that's kind of the same concept we're talking about now, where, I haven't really, again, we've been friendly. We haven't really done a lot of business together, but then now we're finally realizing the value of the relationship, right?
Right. Well, the question is, how many opportunities has he had to actually analyze or assess the worth that you bring to the table.
Yeah.
Right. And I think over 10 or 15 years, I would assume that there's more than one opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And so I think to the people that are on the other side saying, well, hang on, have you done enough to showcase your own value? Or have you known him well enough, or allowed him to know you well enough in order to make that value judgment with informed perspective? Then, if he hasn't had that opportunity, maybe that's the problem, and maybe your responsibility would be to showcase that.
Yeah, and I think that is a lot of my problem I've had. But I think it's a lot of entrepreneurs' problems too. They don't know how to showcase the value that they actually provide somebody, and I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs may not become as successful as they should be, even though they're very good at what they do. Is they don't showcase that value very much, right? But again, when you're not in the business of doing something, so in my situation, right, I'm a real estate developer. I invest in a lot of real estate here in the Space Coast in Brevard County, Florida. Right. And I've met a lot of people, but that's not a full-time business for me, right? That's more of a passive type investment where I have multiple properties and, I do certain things. And so I meet a lot of people in the ordinary course of that business. I meet other investors, I meet brokers, wholesalers, and a wide variety of people. And so I think the reason why I don't showcase my value in that aspect would be because it's not I don't consider it anyways, even though I do work a lot with it. I don't consider it a full-time venture or a venture where, those relationships are valuable to me, right? Even though I like them and they are valuable to me, in my mind, I don't think they're valuable, right? If that makes sense. So I'm more like willy-nilly, or I'm more, just open to doing whatever. And I don't actually say, hey, this is my job, this is my business, right? And I think I'm giving myself my own advice. Like I gave you when we first started Easler Law, people said, well, you should offer free consultations, right? And I said to you, are you crazy? Why would you offer free consultation? You went to law school for, to get a law degree. It was, I think, 7 years, right? Plus all the other hard knocks learning lessons you've had, business failure to, dealing with complex transactions. That's all knowledge and information that you've acquired very painfully over the course of your lifetime, right? Like just like me or anybody else listening to the show. And I taught you how to value that and said, no, if people are not willing to pay for your life experience and your actual legal advice and your malpractice insurance and all this other stuff, then they're probably not going to pay you to actually resolve their problem. Therefore, you're just going to be spinning your wheels, right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And if we look at the foundation of business and entrepreneurship, the core of it is appraisal.
Yeah,
right?
You have to appraise your time. You have to say, what is this life experience worth? And I think for me, that's been an ongoing process, right, for my whole entire life. For those that don't, know what I've done in life, I started with a $20 snow shovel in Calgary, Canada, built a pretty substantial business.
Right.
Looking back at my age, when I started at 12 years old, my mom and dad did help me shovel sidewalks, but ultimately I did a lot of the sales work and the business development work and so forth. And by the time I was 18 or 19, I had a pretty successful business, right? And when you come from a place of failure and you're rebuilding, it's really hard to appraise your time because you feel like you're worthless. So I think it's an ongoing lesson for me as far as, reappraising my value. And I don't really value my time when it comes to real estate, knowledge, information, transactional type situations that I really don't value myself based on that. Maybe I should. And I think that's a lot of the problem with entrepreneurs too, is they just, again, like you said, they don't understand the value that they're actually providing, even though they're providing a lot of value. So how would you suggest to somebody if they're coming to talk to you or something, or even me, how would you help them understand the appraisal method and them providing value? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So this often comes into place whenever people are coming in for a contract, or when they're looking for a partnership, right? So let's say you want to start a business with another member and you want to start an LLC.
Yeah.
Planning and having a meeting of the minds,
yes,
right, from the outset is critical, right? Because when there's a disparity between what you guys believe to be the value of what you're contributing to the relationship, there's always going to be some kind of conflict, resentment, or friction, right?
Yes.
So if you can out-define it, right? What do you bring into the business? Are you going to bring money? Are you going to bring expertise? Are you going to bring leadership? Are you going to bring connections?
Yeah.
Are we going to use those connections? And what are those things worth, right? Let's put some numbers on things. because that's all we can do. We can guesstimate, right? We can, there's fuzzy lines, of course. But if the person that you're working with thinks that you're worth $10,000 when you come in as a member, and what you bring to the table is worth $10,000, but you believe what you're bringing to the table is worth $1 million, there's going to be problems down the line.
Of course. And I think a lot of people don't, even myself, don't think of that at the time when we're forming these relationships, whether it's, we're talking from a business context, right?
Sure.
Obviously, not in a personal or relationship-oriented context. I guess a business relationship is a relationship, but I think it's more transactional, right? So I think for me, when I value stuff, I really want to help people out. That's one of the reasons why I like what I do, right? Whether it's helping people design a business and start a business from nothing, whether it's helping people transition from being an employee to an entrepreneur, that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And so I think that also has an impact on my appraisal of my value, because I'm interested in helping them first and foremost before I'm interested in making money, which is being the reason why I'm so successful now. But it's also been the reason why it's caused me a lot of anguish and pain, right? Because I feel like all those stressful situations I went through when I was younger with my first business failure, and all the networking I've done and all the people I've spoken to and helped and learned from and so forth, I feel like that knowledge is worth a lot of money to people. It should be worth a lot of money, because I'm basically speeding them up 10 times to becoming successful, because I help them avoid roadblocks or potholes in the road, so they don't lose a tire or wreck their car, or their entrepreneurship dream, or what I call a car, right? An entrepreneurship car. So again, it's a slippery slope for me, because I don't want to lose a relationship, but I also need to value my effort. And I think, I don't know if I'll ever fully get over that, how to say no, but I'm going to start learning how to say no. Because again, you need to learn how to say no to be successful in business, period. And I think that's what makes most successful, like really successful business people successful, is they know how to say no, and they know, like you said, how to define that value, right?
Right. I think that's important, because again, if that conversation had gone differently, let's say that person did understand the value of that list. Yeah. And they came to you and said, hey, listen, I understand that this list that you could be providing to me is worth $25,000 if I were to go buy it in the marketplace. I understand that I don't have $25,000. I'm not able to give you $25,000 for this. But if you could do me the favor and just give me that list, I will repay you in the future. Yeah. That conversation might have gone differently.
Of course. Yeah, right? Of course.
So if they had understood and we were able to demonstrate the value of what we were providing, then maybe that relationship would have been differently, or maybe they would have paid you the $25,000 if that's what it was really worth.
Worth to them, yeah.
Right. So first we have to understand our own worth before we can even effectively communicate and showcase it to other people when they come to us. So that's one spectrum, right?
Okay.
And you're over here on this level of the spectrum,
yeah.
Right? You're saying, hey, I'm more humble, humility, that kind of thing, and that's why I have a problem valuing myself and saying no to people. But remember, in that classroom, there was 50% of the class that had not raised their hand. They were saying no. And so for those people, they have started with a mindset of caution, but also potentially more value over what they were bringing to the table than maybe what they were actually worth. And so they may be putting away opportunities where they could add value by saying no too frequently. So to those people in my classroom, I said, start learning to say yes, right? If your initial knee-jerk reaction is to say no all the time, then you're definitely going to lose out on some of the best opportunities in any higher level university to network, to join clubs, learn new interesting practice areas that you might be, more interested in doing than what you originally thought. So there's two sides to that coin. And of course, just that little experiment is not enough for me to really do a full psychoanalysis. Not that I'm even capable of doing that.
Of course.
But it really is important for all of us to start thinking about our unconscious, preferences when it comes to these things, and whether or not we're accurately valuing ourselves, whether that's too low or too high.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think the takeaway I'm getting right now is, I need to define what that relationship is, right? So I think we need to define, is it a personal relationship? Is it actually personal? where they know your wife, your kids, they babysit them, they take them on fishing trips and so forth, and then categorize that relationship into one. And then the second part for me is, okay, that person is, I'm friendly with that person. Doesn't mean I'm friends with them, but I'm friendly with them from a, an employment or like a business perspective. And what value does that person provide my business, right? And I think this is actually kind of flows into time management as well. Saying yes and no actually helps with time management.
Right.
And so if you define what that relationship is in your own head, right, even maybe with the other person, but generally in your own head, okay, this person is this type of relationship to me, and this is what it means to me. So this is how I'm going to treat this relationship. So yes, I will say yes, but I'm going to say yes with caveats where, hey, I need to get paid for my time, my energy, my skill set, because this is the way this relationship was formed. Like, we're a business, this is business, right? This is not a personal, like, you've saved my mother from drowning and I'm gonna, I owe you a debt of gratitude for the rest of my life, right? This is a business transaction. And I think you need to
even
decide.
then, even that situation is a value judgment, right? There's going to be some level of value that you're going to attribute to that benefit that was conferred upon
Yeah.
you. If he saved your mom then from drowning, there's still going to be a limit to what you're going to be able to do for him.
Then.
Are you going to massacre 1,000 people in
they ask
exchange
you?
for that? Of course not.
Yeah, of course, I get it. But I think you need to determine first and foremost from an entrepreneurship perspective where that person fits into your journey, right? And if that person's purely transactional, then you need to make efforts in your own mind to appraise your value and say, this is what I'm worth. And based on your situation or what your ask is of me, this is what I think the value is to you based on giving you my knowledge, my skill set, my contacts, my database, whatever I'm giving that individual or that person, right?
Right.
So I think you need to define the relationship first to get a proper appraisal, right? Because again, that list may change, make them multi-billionaires, right? We've had situations in my career where I helped somebody start an e-commerce business. We made a deal and that person did very well, a couple years into the relationship because of my efforts up front.
Right.
And then, so I gave them all this knowledge, all this information. I used my own money personally to build their business, right? Without them knowing, because that's just the type of person I am. I like to work behind the scenes. And when they started becoming successful, they started hiding money. They started doing different things, right? So again, I should have valued my skill sets more and earned more money than what I did. Does that make sense? Or am I off topic a little bit here?
No, I think you're right. And it also goes back to them understanding the value that you contributed,
Yeah.
right? Because if they had truly understood the value that you're contributing to their business, then maybe they wouldn't have done what they did.
But do people really understand the value that you create up front? So
I think that's one of the responsibilities of us as a party to any particular transaction.
yeah.
Right.
Because I think people have that question. Like, I have that question all the time. Like, how do I showcase this value? Like, I'm very good at what I do. I have, a good database of contacts that like me, that trust me, that follow my advice. But how do you value that from relationship to relationship? Because like we said earlier, okay, I give this list, and this is a real life example. I give this list to this person, and they don't value me very much. They give it to whoever they were going to give it to, and I get nothing for it, even though I've taken the phone calls, I've built those relationships with those people on that list. But I feel like, why would I give that list up for free? Because it's a business relationship. Does that make sense?
Well, listen, it's okay to donate
Yes.
your time, your energy, your value.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, before you do that, make sure that the other side recognizes and accepts your worth and your value judgment.
Okay, so give me an example. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but give me an example. How would I, based on the list that we've talked about for the show, how would I display that? How would I showcase that?
Well, we start with something simple. We ask them what they think it's worth, right? Hey, you've asked me for a copy of the list. What do you think it's worth? If he comes back and says, I don't think it's worth anything, and yet you still believe that it's worth at least $10,000 in the market,
Yeah.
right? Then there's obviously a disparity there. Now, that's an opportunity for you, if you so choose, to then try and explain why you believe your value judgment is better than his appraised value judgment.
Okay.
Now, if it's so far off that it doesn't seem like it's practical, then just say, you know what, I think we're too far off in terms of what we understand the value of what I'm about to do for you, even if I was going to do it for you for free, that I don't want to do business with you anymore.
Because you don't value me.
Because we have our valuation methods, our appraisal methods are too far apart. And it's not even worth it for me to even start to try and spend my time, which I value, to then explain how this is going to help you. Because if you don't understand that at this outset, being this far in, knowing me, knowing what I provide, and that I'm an honest person and I deal very well, then maybe it's not worth it.
So I guess this is kind of the same concept of somebody saying, I've helped that person out so much, and they just keep taking. What we call professional takers. That's the term we use all the time, right? That person is a professional taker.
Yeah, well, most professional takers, either consciously or subconsciously, have a problem with valuing other people's time, right? So either they recognize their value and then don't act in accordance with that in terms of what a common reasonable person will do in that scenario, or they don't recognize it because they just never learned the right way to value other people's time, money, and contributions.
So where do you draw the line between a business relationship and a personal relationship, right? So where do you draw the line? So here, I'm gonna eye you up, for instance, right? Hi, Andrew. I'm James, and welcome. I'm an entrepreneur, and I develop real estate and help people build their businesses. And I really like you as a person. We've done, we just met. So where do you define the value? Like, how do you start the appraisal process, right? When it comes to that relationship, do you say to yourself, this person's only going to be a business person and I have no personal interest in building a personal relationship, but I'll be friendly and, I'll have all the fun stuff. Or do you say, this person's a really good person, I want to become personal friends with them? And then, do you see what I'm saying? I think that's the biggest conflict people have is when you meet somebody, you don't know where they stand, meaning you don't know if they're going to be a business associate because you're trying to sell them, or you're going to be personal friends because you like them and respect them, right? Or you want to build something. So I think there's two, it's not everything here. Let me go back.
Right.
It's like having an employee, right? If you're an employee of a company or you have employees, you define that role as you are the employer and they're the employee, right? So you know how to act or how to handle certain situations. Now, if it's a friend, a personal friend, you may handle it a little bit more emotionally, right? And less analytically. So that's what the point I'm trying to make is, where do you draw the distinction when you're first meeting somebody or when you're into a long-term friendly relationship, whether it's, business associates, whatever, family, friends, where do you start that appraisal process? Meaning that where do you define them? How do you put them in?
First and foremost, I don't appraise myself to be some kind of expert sociologist. I'm not that kind of person.
I'm talking from a legal perspective,
but when it comes to that kind of legal perspective, I would suggest that you start with the circumstances in which you met them, right? If you were referred to this person by another business associate, then the presumption should be that you should put them into that category, that they're going to be in a business relationship, and you probably shouldn't mix personal stuff with business.
Yes.
Right? And if you are going to start crossing that line, or you have the desire, let's say you meet them in you're at your neighbor's house and you meet them at a barbecue, you start talking, you find what they're doing interesting. Maybe you want to invest in their business. Maybe you want to do a partnership with them later on.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you've already started the relationship on a friendly term and you want to cross the boundary into a business relationship, then obviously having a meeting of the minds and understanding the professionalism and making sure that they're able to not mix that business and professional relationship and still maintain that relationship going forward is an important conversation to have.
So maybe that's how you actually meet friends. What I call it natural networking, right? We've talked about this before, where some people they go to the chamber of commerce events, then they go to these networking events and they're just being sold, and everybody hates networking. Even me, I hate networking, right? Because you always know what the networking's about. And so I like what they call
I want to say, we're not saying that Chamber of Commerce is useless.
No. I mean, they do have value. What I'm saying is the whole point I'm trying to make is, again, if you're going to one of these networking events, whether it's at a local, club or something like that, you have to understand that you're going there for business, right? You're going there to either be sold or to sell. That's really what that is.
Right.
And so you might meet somebody at those events that you like you said, you find them very interesting. You may want to learn more about their business. And that's what I call natural networking, when you have a connection with another business person about what their product is or what their services or their ideas or their essence or whatever it is, right? And so you have to have respect. So I think the lesson I've learned from you today, among other things, is, if you have a friend or you meet them in like a more of a social setting at a barbecue or whatever, and you want to do business together, you have these ideas, sit down and make sure you draw the line of respect, meaning that, hey, we met at a personal gathering. I like you as an individual. I find you very interesting, but on a business perspective, this is the business and this is what I'm worth. This is the value. This is what I provide. And can you respect that? And part of showing that respect to you is saying, hey, I value your time, and I value your time that I'm going to pay you for your consultation, right? So, and you get this all the time as an attorney. People come to you and they say, hey, we're at a party, or you're at a party, and they're like, hey, I got a legal question, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, hey, I'm at a party. It's Friday at 10 o'clock at night. I don't really want to give legal advice, right? And then they say, okay, whatever, bye, and they leave.
And then I'm the jerk.
And then you're the jerk. And this is
right.
This is the whole point I'm trying to make is, again, that person didn't respect your time, your knowledge, your education, all the pain you went through to recycle that pain into something of value for somebody. So that's a person that probably would not even make a good friend either, because they're, again, trying to extract information out of you based on your life experiences and your education for their benefit, but they don't respect you because not only are they saying, hey, I don't have the money to pay you, I just need this question answered. They're not even saying, they're just asking the question, expecting you to answer it. And if you don't answer it, you're the jerk.
Well, yeah, that goes back to a potentially flawed appraisal method.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not for me. I mean, everybody's on their own journey, and maybe they're right. Maybe I have worthless information to provide.
Yes.
Okay. And,
yes.
and therefore they shouldn't have to do anything in exchange or, follow the regular procedure to do that.
Yeah.
But in general, right, if there's a disparity in how I'm appraising my own value with how somebody else is praising my value, then either there's a flaw in my method or their method. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's certainly an ongoing process, and there might be a situation where I'm way off. And you just learn from it, right? You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, everybody makes mistakes.
But,
I mean, that's how we learn, right? This is how we make those, we learn from those mistakes, we recycle it into something good, and we try and build off of that, right? So I think the lesson is, if you're going to say yes to somebody, right, obviously try and think about the ask first, right? Me, I like to say yes because I think quick, right? I'm not as sharp as I used to be when I was, 18, 19, 20. And again, because I'm a pleaser and I want to say yes to people, I have to learn to say, hey, I listen to your ask. What's your ask? Okay, my ask is I need this list. Yes, I may be willing to provide it to you, but I have to define why do you need it, and what purpose is it going to fulfill? And if it's from a business perspective, what's it worth to me? And I have to define that ahead of time before I get to that final yes. And I think the lesson for me in this situation is I said yes too quick. Then when I got off the phone with that individual, I started thinking about it. I'm like, why would I give this person my list? This is crazy. Why would I say yes to that? Because I actually like that person, respect them. That's why I said yes.
Right.
But unfortunately, instead of them saying, hey, I'll pay you for the list, or I understand that was a lot of time that you've taken to develop that list.
Yeah, I really appreciate you willing to do that for free, even though I understand that it's worth a lot more to you and to me.
Correct.
Than just giving it away for free.
Yeah, and then I get a text message saying, hey, just a reminder, make sure you send me that list. Not like, hey,
thanks again.
Just wanted to follow up. Where's the list? So
right. So that's where we get to that disparity between the value judgments.
So I think I know my answer, obviously. But okay, so for the listeners out there, I think the takeaway is, if you're going to say yes, make sure you have a meeting of the minds, understand why you're saying yes, first and foremost. And if it's a business context, make sure you get value for that yes, right? Don't just do anything for the sake of doing it because you're training your friends or your business associates the wrong way, because they're not going to respect your time. They're just going to waste more and more time. Just like earlier, when somebody expects a free consultation, what makes somebody think that if they want a free consultation and they expect that free consultation, they're probably not going to want to pay their legal bill, or they're probably going to complain about the time you've spent to actually resolve their issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, so again, this all goes back to the value appraisal method.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a situation where it's personal injury, you get into an accident, the value of your potential claim to that attorney is worth more than having to receive some kind of monetary compensation for that consultation. So in a personal injury context, for example, free consultations are very common because both parties have an understanding and a meeting of the minds with the understanding that when you come to me with this fact scenario and this potential claim, I'm willing to give up my time because there's value in what you're bringing to the table.
Well, because they know
it's
the
going to be
payment.
contingency.
Yeah, there's the
right?
contingency is the person has insurance. Like if you go to a personal injury, like again, I don't want to get off topic here, but if you go to a personal injury attorney and you say, hey, this person hit me and I want to sue them, the first thing that attorney is going to ask you as a PI attorney is, do they have insurance? Did you get your insurance information? And if they don't have insurance, the chance of them taking your case on are probably next to nothing. And because if they don't have insurance, they probably don't have the money to pay you. But getting back to my point is if you say yes, have a meeting of the minds, understand why you're saying yes. And if you want to put value on it, put value on it. If you want to do it because you like doing it, then I guess do it. I mean, that's, your prerogative, but try not to say no to everything because you might lose opportunities. Right. And again, if you do say yes and you change your mind and they get mad at you, then they never valued you to begin with. That's what I'm taking away from this, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it could be just a flaw in their appraisal method, right? Maybe they didn't have all the information. That could have been an issue too.
Yeah.
But in a situation where you're aware that they have all the data necessary in order to make the appraisal judgment, and you don't want to spend the time to try and convince them to change that method, then yeah, it's probably time to terminate that relationship.
That makes sense and move on to greener pastures, so to speak, right? So takeaway is you have to have the if you say yes, you have to have the meeting of the minds. So what is that? What are those three things you said earlier in the podcast?
Yeah. So for an enforceable contract, we're looking at offer. So somebody's communicating essential terms to the contract, inviting acceptance.
Yep.
Right. You turn around and you have the ability to say no, which would be a rejection, and then there's nothing. You could say yes, in which you have an acceptance, or you could say yes, but I want X, Y, and Z in addition, which is changing the terms, which will then be actually a rejection and then a counteroffer.
Perfect.
Okay, so you have offer, acceptance. If you said yes without any additional terms, again, assuming this is a service contract, not a product agreement,
of course,
because there's a different rule for that.
Yes.
Then you have to have consideration, right? Some kind of value exchange, and value can be a positive value. I've given you $500 in exchange for that list that you were going to give me. So now we have consideration for your required performance to give me that list.
Yep.
Or some kind of reliance to somebody's detriment, a change in position.
Okay, perfect. And so you mentioned a product is different. What would be the equivalent to a product?
Yeah. So if I was going to buy a chair from you, right?
Yeah.
Then and we're dealing with like consumer products, for example.
Yeah.
Then we're looking at things under the UCC, okay, which is the Uniform Commercial Code. It's a different set of laws other than the common law.
Okay.
And so they have a very complicated way of looking at offer and acceptance, and it depends on whether you're a merchant or not, and you're dealing with consumer to consumer transaction, business to consumer, or business to business, and it's a pretty complicated.
So that's a whole other show.
It's a whole nother show.
Probably
Absolutely.
3, 4, 5 hours. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
But the short answer is, saying yes with other conditions may not be a rejection and counteroffer when we're dealing with products.
Okay, perfect. So offer, acceptance. Okay, so we have an offer, we have acceptance.
Supported by consideration.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And then the appraisal method is you have to determine what your knowledge, what your product, your service is worth that specific individual, right? Whether you think it's worth nothing and you just give it away for free, or you think there's some sort of value there to them, you have to negotiate. And I think that's what makes, again, a good entrepreneur is you say, hey, I have this skill. This skill is valuable to this person for X amount of dollars, but the same skill might be valued to that person for a lot more.
Absolutely.
Right? And so learning to value yourself is really, really important. I think a lot of people have that problem, including me, right? I don't value a lot of my knowledge all the time the way I should value it, right? And then we get angry, not angry, but we get very disappointed when we give so much love and so much knowledge to people to help them, and they just don't appreciate or respect it. And I think everybody, no matter who's listening to the show, has had that some similar or some semblance of that situation before, where they've gone out of their way to help somebody multiple times or once, and they feel like they've been taken advantage of, or they don't feel appreciated.
because they've assigned a value to whatever they've been giving,
Yep.
and the other person has assigned a value that is 0 or something well too far apart from that original value.
So I think I need to revalue personally me, and I think other people out there right now, I think they're already doing this, to be honest with you, because I think I'm doing it right now, is I think people need to look at their, from a business perspective, and again, not personal, but from a business entrepreneurship perspective, look at the contact you have, right? Determine if that contact has been useful for you or not, again, from a business perspective. And if it's useful to you, determine the value of that contact and say, hey, okay, this is your ask. What's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? And how is this going to help you? Is that a good framework to determine if that relationship's worthwhile pursuing? Because again, we get bogged down. We don't want 1,000 people calling us and 1,000 people to do nothing for us, right? There's time vampires at that point.
Well, listen, I mean, that's not to say that there are people that you meet in your life that maybe come back into your life 15 years later and provide tremendous value, right?
Yeah.
The question that you should be asking is, am I giving this contact meaningful opportunities to either take advantage of my value or for me to provide value to them? And neither of us are finding a way to take advantage of some kind of transaction.
So it's not a give and take. It's just either a take or a give. So I think, again, a good successful relationship is give and take, right? You're not going to expect to get the same value from that person. It's going to be give and take over time. And I think that's what makes good friends and also good business relationships is giving and taking. Hey, 1 year I might do more for you. The next year I might do less for you. But overall, we get along. There's different value because, again, if I give you some business advice that makes you $1 million, that's going to have a lot more value on that relationship than you saying, well, here's a free massage to my local massage therapist because you're such a good person, right?
Right. Well, again, I think people are okay with having an imbalance in value exchange.
Yeah.
Right. I think most people are okay, especially Americans. It's part of our culture.
Yes.
We were talking about this earlier today.
Yes.
That we're very giving.
Yes.
Okay. And we definitely do not have a problem giving more than we take. Okay?
Yeah, I will say that about America. That's one thing I will say that's why I love America so much is because Americans are very unique in that aspect, right? And I think that's why a lot of people want to come to America. It's not just for the opportunity. And a lot of people say right now, especially in 2025, oh, America, we have a lot of problems. I don't care who says that. America is the best country in the world by far. I've done business all over the world. And I will say this is by far the best country to become an entrepreneur in, 100%.
I agree.
Lots of access to capital. There's lots of people here willing to sacrifice to help everybody get ahead for the common good, right?
Right. So
still, even now.
So for those givers like you, the pleasers, people that want to say yes and want to give, and they have no problem with this power imbalance or value imbalance.
Yeah.
The important thing you need to start doing is checking, right? Testing the temperature for the people that you're giving stuff to, right? You go to the people and make sure that they understand the value of what you're giving. Because if all they're going to do is sit there and take and have zero value attributed to this free stuff that you're giving them for nothing in return, then you're not creating a good relationship. You're creating
a toxic relationship. Where you're going to feel like you've been taken advantage of the whole time.
So consider this, right? Let's say you're mentoring a young entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Okay. They come to you and say, hey, James, I understand you've done some really great things in your life. You learned a lot really tough lessons by failing and starting again. I value all of that knowledge that you give me. I don't have the money to pay you what I think you're worth.
Of course.
But would you please be so kind as to give me some of your time? Can you give me 1 hour a week to, run some ideas by you? Right. I think you would be okay potentially.
Yeah.
Right. Having that kind of conversation, setting up a relationship, doing those kinds of things. What's different would be you having somebody come to you who maybe is not a brand new entrepreneur, maybe somebody who's maybe got as much experience as you.
Yeah. Just
coming to you and asking you, hey, what do you think of this? Can you spend some time researching this issue and giving me this topic and giving me that? And then you say, well, hey, I don't work for free here, buddy. Right. Yeah. And them saying, well, I don't think you're worth anything.
Yeah.
Right. Are you going to continue giving in that relationship?
No, because you feel they're ungrateful.
So important is to make sure that they have a similar value attribution to what you're going to be giving them.
Okay.
So it's okay to have this value imbalance, but make sure that they truly understand your worth.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I already know my answer, what I'm going to be texting afterwards, after the show. But again, I think that I think it gave me a lot of food for thought and how to go forward with some of these relationships and, clean it out and just say, let's focus on the people that really matter. They're going to make an actual impact, and we're going to make an impact on each other's life, not just me, right? But make an impact on each other's life. And if you both make an impact on each other's life, that will lead to a successful, friendly, business relationship.
Absolutely.
I think that makes sense. Awesome. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks for coming on again, Andrew. We really appreciate the knowledge, and thank you for I know you're not a psychotherapist, but thank you very much. You're going to help me, and you've already helped me, and I'm sure you're going to help a lot of other people out there. Thanks again for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
See you later, everybody.